For most of history, money has been voluntarily chosen by the free market. But today, we are forced to accept currencies issued by the government. Currencies backed by nothing other than that force itself. But how did we get here? Let's mine deep. Rhinestones, alcohol, cowrie shells, precious metals. Money has taken many forms, but gradually, as the power of governments grew in size and scope, money began taking on a more controlled nature. Instead of being discovered, it became declared by decree, which is where we get the term fiat currencies from. Fiat is a Latin word that means by decree or by force. And the first time money matched that description was in China in the 11th century when the Song dynasty issued the jiaozi. The jiaozi was a paper currency that, unlike its contemporaries, was not redeemable for a voluntary form of money like precious metals. The move gave the dynasty immense control over the Chinese economy by granting them complete authority over the medium of exchange. But man-made solutions are often met with man-made problems, including the oldest of all, budgeting. The dynasty printed far too many jiaozis to fund their deficit, and the currency eventually suffered hyperinflation as a result. There were more attempts in the time that followed, but all met the same fate. Fast forward a millennium, and the bright-eyed nation of the United States found themselves smack dab in the middle of the First World War. The world operated on a gold standard system at the time, in which most currencies were convertible to gold. But under immense pressure to fund their war-induced deficit, the US confiscated everyone's gold with Executive Order 6102 and severed the tie between it and the US dollar. They came back onto the gold standard shortly after. But just around the corner awaited nasty inflation, the Great Depression, the World War II, and more deficits. So they established the Bretton Woods system to stabilize the US dollar. And since it was the world's reserve currency at the time, the world economy too, the system made dollars convertible to gold, effectively pegging their value to the gold that backed them. And then foreign currencies were pegged to the dollar instead of gold directly. Still a gold standard, just with an extra step. But a few wars later, the deficit was growing. And by 1971, President Nixon temporarily paused the convertibility of dollars to gold, taking the world off the gold standard once and for all.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Since that date, we've been living on a fiat world. His actions were not temporary. So why should you care? Because the dollar has lost over 90% of its value since that day, and the rate of its devaluation is speeding up. When the world reserve currency becomes a hot potato that nobody wants to hold for too long, they start seeing the world through a short-term lens. They get hasty. And when the whole world becomes hasty, the quality of its produce inevitably declines. But to add insult to injury, prices rise regardless. The result? Decreasing quality of life for humanity, despite seeing the most technological advancement in history. Don't believe me? Browse WTFhappened in 1971.com for some stats to back it. Let me ask you something. Do you think we will stay in a fiat world forever? Or is Bitcoin here to clean up the mess? Don't miss Alyse Killeen Backstage. And how was your experience to invest in Bitcoin? Like, what would you advise a newbie or people that are trying to nibble into Bitcoin?
Well, I would say that it's a really wonderful way to do well while also doing good work. So you can make great ROI by investing in Bitcoin companies, but you're also going to be investing in companies that are looking to change the world for the better. And so I felt very grateful.
How did Bitcoin click for you? When was that moment that it made sense that you were like, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to dedicate my life to?
That's a really good question. So I found Bitcoin in 2013, and when I found it, it was as an infrastructure technology because I was investing in infrastructure tech at the time. And what was special about Bitcoin and what made it click and made me want to spend my life here was that I saw it as fintech for poor people. And that's a large market. There's a great need. And so there was an opportunity, like I said, to do really well in terms of those core investing KPIs, in terms of ROI. But there was also an opportunity to do good in the world and to bring fair and free finance to everyone. And so it was just impossible to sort of turn my attention away from it.
And let's say you were in dinner with Satoshi Nakamoto. What is one thing that you would ask him?
I would probably ask about the decision to remain anonymous because it was so selfless, and it's unique to be able to be that selfless. And so I'd be keen to learn more from him about how, or her or them, how they thought about that. But I'll say this, I feel very lucky to be surrounded by really deeply technical people in Bitcoin today that are extending Satoshi Nakamoto's work in such a way that when I'm at dinner with them, I feel the same sort of learning opportunity exists. And so while I might not be at dinner with him, I'm at dinner with the folks that are sort of his proteges and get the opportunity to learn from them, which is almost just as good.